video making time is over. But if someone were to keep editing the video, I wouldn't tell on them. You probably need to start uploading the video, if you haven't already, by 2:30 at the latest, which is about an hour. But I'm going to ask that you not treat any video processing from here forward as a group activity. Are we okay with that? Yes. So if someone is sitting in the corner editing or uploading, that's okay. I am excited. As much as we've covered so far today, we've got about 2.5 hours left to cover about 10 times as much stuff. So we've got a lot more to cover, a lot more to learn. I hope. Did anybody enjoy making a movie today? Yeah, I know Wilma did not enjoy making movies today because Wilma does this for a living. She thought this was a pain, but I hope somebody else thought this was kind of fun. If you are in the mode of editing, be sure to write down the upload instructions. If you need those in 10 minutes, I'm not coming back to them, so write that down so that we don't have to disrupt the process to finish up, okay? So yeah, the key thing is video.devon.today. Okay, video.devon.today. It's just a website that'll prompt you to upload your video. Okay. All righty. Now, when we have talked already today about this idea of partners a number of times. We counted them. We estimated how much money they're worth. One of the key steps when where are we in the process of talking about crowdfunding now? What stage are we in? Do you remember? We're in the preparation phase, right? Where does most of the work for a crowdfunding campaign happen? In the preparation phase, right? So we're in the thick of it. So one of the things that we have to do is really get our partners committed. Now, I'm going to tell you something that, again, one of those things I've learned from experience is it is easy to make a list of our partners. It is much harder to get them actually to engage. So one of the things that you need to do is to have a one-on-one, face-to-face conversation with all of your partners and say, will you be my crowdfunding partner? Right? Now, you need to you cannot let there be any ambiguity about whether or not one of your partners is your partner, because it may be that someone you think should be as engaged as you are is just unwilling or unable to engage. So you got to ask the question. And then the same thing with your champions. It's a little more obvious with champions. Usually they're not people that you sit around the table with every day, so asking them makes more sense. But you need to ask them and think about people that make sense. It could be anyone in your circle who loves what you're doing. It could be anyone from your mother to a customer, a beneficiary of your nonprofit. It might be one of your big donors that just loves what you're doing. It might be a regular volunteer. Look for among all those audiences to find and then commit your champions and get them all counted up. We've kind of done that on a preliminary basis, but we did that without the benefit of talking to them, right? So when we're in the final analysis, we've got to make a count once they are fully known to us. And then we've got to get them trained. You can certainly impart all the knowledge that you got today, and any that you brought with you before, right? Any information, knowledge, etc. These are a few of the resources that are available to you. There's my crowdfunding training site, goodcrowd.school. You can go straight to the course, crowdfundingforsocialgood.info. I also do news. I think Joe mentioned that I do a show. I've done 1,100 episodes of my show now. A lot of those episodes are related to crowdfunding, so you can check out my show, listen to that. And the crowdfunding related discussions there are on goodcrowd.info. That's kind of a news site for crowdfunding, focused on social good. You all have the workbook, and you can go online and order more copies of the workbook if you want at Amazon. And then I also have a book that goes with the workbook called Crowdfunding for Social Good. And I'll tell you the secret, it's very, very expensive on Amazon. If you order the download, it's 99 cents. 99 cents. So most of you can probably afford that.
Sit back again.
Yeah, 99 cents for the downloadable version of my book, Crowdfunding for Social Good, straight from Amazon.com. Just go to Amazon.com, search for Crowdfunding for Social Good, and you'll see the workbooks, and you'll see the book. And the book is $15, but the downloadable book, ebook book, is 99 cents. Okay. And those can all help you with training. Let's talk about organizing lists now. This is really one of the most fundamental parts of crowdfunding, and we're kind of working backwards. So I think we're, what page number are we on? We're on about 28, 29, somewhere in there. We're going to talk, and there's actually, not only is there a place for you to start writing your lists in the workbook, you'll notice there are links to some resources throughout the book. And one of those resources is, I mean, it's not a very sophisticated tool, but it is a spreadsheet where you can put names and organize that sort of thing for building your lists if you want. You can just download my simple templates if you want from Google Drive. Now, the key thing here is that everyone on the team, whether you are a partner, a booster, a champion, should be managing and actively pursuing your own list. One thing I would insert here into this discussion is that I generally think of this as one big umbrella campaign with lots of players. And all of the platforms we talked about earlier, except Caring Crowd, works that way. So you can literally have 30 individual crowdfunders divided up into 3 teams, 10 each, all contributing to a master campaign. It's sort of like a multi-level marketing scheme like Amway almost, right? That it kind of rolls up. And you can get really fancy that way. But one of the really most profound insights that I've gained this year, I think, was talking to one of the CEOs of one of the crowdfunding sites, is the value of doing lots of little independent crowdfunding campaigns instead of one master campaign. So it may be that the way to approach this is not as a big umbrella master strategy, but as a way of empowering your fans, friends, followers, beneficiaries, whomever, to do a simple little crowdfunding campaign all on their own. But lots of them, right? So that you end up raising, in Facebook style, $200 at a time, but from lots of different people. Anyway, just a way to think about this. But everybody runs their own campaign, whether it's as part of a master campaign or truly an independent campaign. Every fundraiser should be kind of running their own show, especially with respect to this idea of lists. Okay, and let me just go back. I get so excited about lists, but how many of you have a Facebook account? Okay, so obviously Facebook is a great place to find friends. How many of you have a LinkedIn account? Okay, Instagram, right? So already, right, you probably on those 3 lists have thousands of friends right there in those places. The key, however, is not to build the longest list. It's not worthless to have a long list, and if you want to do that, you can. But I would focus on quality over quantity. What you really want is to identify 150 people who are likely to give you money. Because it's going to be hard to get a lot more than 100 or 150 donations from one person, or from one person's network. So focus on the people who are most likely to give it to you, okay? There are these 3 key lists that I want to encourage you to think about, and they're somewhat different, and for each person they would be different. For some of our, wealthy, gray-haired white men in the back of the room, a big backer may be somebody who can commit $50,000 or $500,000. For me, a big backer might be $500, right? So think about what it means in the context of what you're trying to accomplish. But I generally think about the low end of that big backer range. I'm thinking about somebody that's going to write a check that maybe have a comma in it, right? That may be the threshold we get to, but probably it's $500 if I'm lucky. That's where I'm thinking. So you're trying to think of, in my network, who are the 3 to 5 people that are the richest, most generous, and closest to me, that I can reach out to and have a comfortable conversation about, please give me a big donation. And then the second list, and I want to emphasize this second list should be your very kindest friends. The people that are the most generous, but not necessarily richest. Forget about capacity to give in terms of their ability to write a big check. I would just think purely in terms of people you would be happy to interact with. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then finally, 100 to 150 of your other best friends, right? Again, focusing on quality of contact over quantity of contact. So someone who's following you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, maybe that's a good friend, especially if you see him at church every Sunday. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how you thank or recognize or what you give in exchange for a crowdfunding donation. Now, there are a few of you who may be in the business of producing something you can literally sell. Like Wilma hates being the focus of attention, but Wilma makes documentary films, right?
Yes.
So you could use crowdfunding on Kickstarter, which is something maybe no one else in this room can do, to pre-sell a copy of a documentary film. That's a little bit different than what the rest of us will probably be doing. But like this is a picture of a computer. That doesn't look like any computer you've ever seen, does it? But this was a computer that was designed for the next billion people who've never had a computer to buy a computer. And one of the things that it recognized in the design was that billion people already have a television. In fact, it's a flat screen television that would plug into a computer, right? But they didn't have a computer yet. And so they build a computer that's just ready to plug in to that television that's already sitting in their home. Anyway, it's brilliant design, but most of us will not be thinking about rewards, apart from Wilma. We won't be giving much stuff. Now, a few of you, maybe you can't see this beautiful white t-shirt here, but there's a beautiful white t-shirt right there. How many of you have ever listened to an NPR station during Pledge Week? You ever heard that? You know, a lot of times you'll hear when you listen to that, they are giving away. They never give anything away during Pledge Week. They will offer sometimes a book or a CD or a videotape, probably not a videotape anymore, DVD, of a program if you'll make like a $100 donation. Well, it's, $100 for a videotape of a show you could watch for free is not a good price, but it is a way of recognizing the donor, right? It's a way of saying thank you. Some of you may want to do that. I don't want to encourage that, but I don't want to discourage that. I want just to put out there that that is an option, right? Whether it's a t-shirt or a poster or a video, something that acknowledges larger gifts rather than just take them in. But generally speaking, what I want to really encourage you to do is to think about how you can acknowledge donors creatively in ways that are free. My very favorite is of this ilk is a nonprofit down in Costa Rica that operated to save the sea turtles, right? And so what they would do is they would actually watch for the sea turtles' mothers to lay their eggs. And then they would harvest those eggs and incubate them, and then they would turn the hatchlings out into the ocean. And sometimes they would pay the poachers to split the load, right? So if the poachers kind of had an incentive to share some of the eggs with them as well. Anyway, one of the things that they did for their larger backers is they would, as they released a hatchling into the sea, they would draw the donor's name in the sand on the beach. And then the hatchling would run across the name. So John was the donor. This hatchling would run across, and they'd take their phone, right? Make a little video, upload that to YouTube, and send it to John to thank him for making that donation. Now that's free, right? None of those steps cost any money. Now I do want to call your attention, though, as you think about strategy, right? What if you had 10,000 donors? Is that free anymore? If you've got 10,000 hatchlings that you have to run across a name, now you're paying people a lot of money, right? It's not free anymore. It may be cheap on a per donation basis, but it's clearly not free. So you have to be a little bit strategic about how you recognize. You don't, sometimes what's free if you do it 3 times or 10 times really isn't free. So be thoughtful, but be creative to come up with ways to recognize and appreciate your donors. Now we're going to work on a press release. And I want to see if we can have a race to see who can prepare a full press release the fastest. But let me walk you through how this works. The key thing to understand about a press release is that it is essentially a newspaper article that you are writing for the newspaper. You're sending them something that is ready to print in the newspaper or the magazine or the blog or whatever, right? It's ready to go. And so you have to put on your fake journalist cap, right? And start thinking about the way you would write about yourself or your organization very much in third person. So some of the marketing language you might want to use has to go away, right? Because is a newspaper ever going to write an article that starts out with Bob, the greatest executive director in the history of nonprofits, said? No, that's not the way it's going to work, right? And so, but oftentimes they are interested in the challenges that you are trying to solve, right? So if you use that same kind of hook that we talked about in the movie, there may be a way to draw in a fact or set of facts that would be attention-getting, and then you could talk about your remedies, what you're doing to solve it, provide a couple of quotes about the way that it'll work. Essentially, it's the same message that you try to convey in the video, but in a whole different style, right? So here's an outline of a press release, and I think this is on page 41 in the book. Am I right? Yeah, so what I want you to do work in whatever group you want. If you want to work in your group of 6 on this, if you want to do it alone, if you want to do it in pairs, however you want to do it. There's no time limit, but I will give a copy of my book, Crowdfunding for Social Good, to the first person who has a complete press release. But understand, you will stand in front of the group and read your press release, okay? That's the deal. Are we ready? Okay, go.
Title, Jerry Rice to headline Kidney Foundation event. Subtitle, Jerry Rice will sign books and donate the proceeds to the Mississippi Kidney Foundation at Lemuria Bookstore in Jackson on July 4th at 1 p.m. Jerry Rice grew up in Mississippi and knows the impact of kidney disease firsthand. It runs in his family. He has long been an advocate for kidney disease by promoting awareness. Kidney disease usually has few, if any, symptoms. Early detection is the key to preventing and slowing the disease. The Mississippi Kidney Foundation provides free screenings for kidney disease statewide. Rice says, if you don't know your creatinine and EGFR, you don't know if you have kidney disease. Paul Carter is the executive director and says, on average, 1 in 10 people we screen have abnormal results. The mission of the Mississippi Kidney Foundation, chartered in 1965, is to serve Mississippi kidney patients by providing quality programs and services, to provide public education and screening, to promote the prevention of kidney disease, and to promote organ donation throughout the state.
Wow. That's brilliant. I should say something. Now, Hall, do you want me to sign the book,
Yes.
or do you want it pristine?
No, sign
Okay, how do you spell Hall?
H-A-L-L.
Okay. I thought that was a brilliant press release. Did everybody agree that was a brilliant press release? Did you recognize the style as being sort of newspaper style, right? I thought the first quote from Jerry Rice was fantastic. You nailed it. I'm glad you got him on the phone, got him to say that to you. No, but that's how press releases are written, right? That coming up with a quote, that's how it happens, right? Someone in the PR department writes down the quote, and you hand it to Jerry Rice, and you say, Jerry, is that okay if you said that? And he says, yes, it's okay. That's how, you've done this before, huh? Yeah, so brilliant work. Oh, sorry, I got to write this down. Okay, Hall, congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you very, very much. Okay. Golly, that was a great press release. So next time we'll have her do the press release workshop. That's what you need. But you could see all of those elements as you were reading, as you read that story, or as you listened to it, right? You could see all of these pieces, one unfold after the other, but you also felt how it came together, right? It was one narrative, one story. It really was a brilliant example of how to write a press release. And at the end, she would include her contact information. And we'll talk more a little bit about how to get this to the media. Now, one thing I want you to be sure to do is write down this email address. When you do a crowdfunding campaign, you will, of course, have a press release, and you will send it to lots of media people. Be sure to send it to me, and I will share it at goodcrowd.info, okay? And if you remind me when you send the email, if you remind me that you took my class, I'll give you priority for being a guest on my show, okay? So let's talk about targeting. The difference between success and failure in a crowdfunding campaign, in terms of things you can control, media outreach is probably the most important. It's certainly one of two keys that I like to talk about, because it is something you can control, and it will expand, right? Because now you're talking about a whole other network, right? The network of the media personalities you may connect with, whether they are bloggers or podcasters or the newspaper or CNN or CBS, right? They each have their own audience and network that isn't related to yours, which is great, right? It's fresh eyeballs. So everybody on the team should be making a list of the people they know in the media, right? And these days we all know someone, right? We all know someone with a podcast or someone with a blog. And the people that are your friends, I would frankly just ask them to do it because they're your friends. I want you to write about this. So you blog about Formula One racing. Great. I love that you do that. Will you write about my crowdfunding campaign for my nonprofit just because we're buddies? Now, he may say no, jerk, but you never know when he might say, well, yeah, I can figure out the Formula One angle on this, and I'll tie it in, I'll write about it. So ask everyone you know. But then look for people who are writing about your space. So locally, it might be in the local newspaper, anyone who's writing about community issues and nonprofits. It might be bloggers who are writing about, if you're doing affordable housing, it might be bloggers who are writing about affordable housing issues. It's kind of niche, and you'll find that there are people out there blogging about that. There's probably a couple of podcasts on affordable housing, right? Go find them. Go find everybody that's writing about this. Go find out who at CNN is covering affordable housing issues, right? Find out who's covering that at Forbes. I will tell you, there's a little secret. Forbes is really about the only outlet that still operates this way. Most Forbes contributors are either unpaid or poorly paid, but one of the impacts of that is that there are literally thousands of Forbes contributors. So you may know one or have one in your extended network. And so you may be able to get an article in Forbes more easily than other national outlets. So I would be sure to look for that. Now, all of you have met me, and you already have my email address. So remember, when you submit that to me, I can't cover all of you in Forbes. I'm sorry. But know that you are at least pitching, when you send me that pitch, you're pitching a Forbes contributor there. And I wouldn't limit it to just me. I want to encourage you to look elsewhere, but don't leave me off your list. I'd feel bad if I saw one of my Forbes contributors writing about you and I missed the chance. So, I want to share a story with you, and I alluded to this earlier. This is really a heartwarming story, but it has a moral that isn't necessarily heartwarming. But this young woman is, her name is Kayla Gayton. And she, as a young woman, she's married to a soldier, so they're not rich, but they have health insurance. They're not rich. She got cancer and was just devastated by that. And I guess she was concerned that she would never be able to have more children. But the cancer was in remission. She was feeling good. And so she and her husband decided to get pregnant. And it went much better than planned. And she ended up pregnant with quadruplets. And so this was really a happy story, although that you think about trying to raise quadruplets on a soldier's salary, that's already an issue. But Kayla's cancer came back while she was pregnant. Now, you can't really treat the cancer while you're pregnant. Really, it's kind of a heartbreaking story. So she waited as long as she could until the babies were ready to be delivered by the first possible healthy measure. So I don't know what it would have been, 30 weeks or something, but quite early. But so they induced the labor early on, and she delivered the 4 babies successfully, and then was able to begin treatment again. The doctors just gave her a 50% chance of surviving the cancer at this point. Well, she and her husband set up a GoFundMe page. And their goal was $5,000. And they actually did get on the local news. A couple of local news stations did a story about them, and their campaign got up to about $4,000. Then a dear friend of mine named Peggy Echevarria heard of their story. She's got a couple of children in the military, and I think she's got a son and a daughter in the military. And so her heart just broke, as a mother, as a military mom especially. Her heart just broke thinking about these kids. She said, they don't need $5,000. They need multiples of that. They need at least $100,000 to get through cancer and everything. Forget the fact that they've got good health insurance. So she called me because she knew I do stuff in this space. So we did a story about this family, and then she and I promoted it like crazy to try and help this family. And we got the money up to almost $20,000. And then someone on Bill O'Reilly's staff, when he was back on TV, dates this story a little bit, it was a year or two ago, before things happened. But Bill's staff saw the story, pitched it to Bill, said maybe we ought to talk about this young woman on our show, and he did. So Bill O'Reilly talked about her situation and her GoFundMe on his show, and within 72 hours, she had $1.1 million. So they turned off the GoFundMe at that point. I thought that demonstrated great character. With the money just rolling in, she pulled the plug on that. But it does highlight, it highlights a couple of things, right? How a personal story resonates with people, right? It demonstrates the power of the media to expand the crowdfunding capacity of your campaign, right? It was a dramatic difference. And of course, it was sort of a step function. One media opportunity led to the next, and shazam, it happened. Well, it also highlights another problem that I want to emphasize in this room, speaking to a group of nonprofit leaders. In a nonprofit, would you ever write a check to a woman, even in this situation, for $1.1 million? You would never do that, right? For a variety of reasons. So there is a question of equity in this with the success of GoFundMe. I'm so glad she got what she needed, but I want to see everybody get what they need. And the better way for everyone to get what they need is through your help, right? So anyway, but remember the other lessons, right? The way that it was personalized to one person. Remember the power of the media to expand the story and channel those ideas in your campaigns as you prepare them, okay? So the next phase of our crowdfunding campaign, phase 3, is the ground war. And this is where we're going to talk about how we actually engage with people one-on-one. And this is really critical stuff. Now, we talked about making a list of the big backers, right? The 5 or so people that you know well enough and that are affluent enough that you can go to them and ask them for a big donation, whatever big is in your situation. I often think about it as, $500, but whatever it is in your situation, you want to identify who they are. So it may be just friends and acquaintances. It may be people you do business with. It may be people who have backed you in the past. It may be a relative of a beneficiary. Who knows? But you target your 5. One way that you may want to do this is to ask them to match donations. it may be more motivating to them to know you will leverage directly their donation to get more donations, so they don't feel like they're just writing a check. That may not be necessary with everyone. It may not work in your circumstance, but think about that as an option for asking them to donate. And so, for instance, you may say, would you match donations on the first day of the campaign, or all the donations from the first week, or whatever? And then you can give them a cap up to a threshold of X, 500, 1,000, 5,000, whatever they can do. But just think about that as an option. And remember, everybody, all the partners, all the boosters, all the champions should be working their own lists. So I want to just kind of focus on the math for just a minute as we go through each of these tiers to begin to show you how this comes together. So if you have one partner who's reaching out to 5 people and 3 give an average of $500, that's $1,500. And you can do that and should do that before the campaign starts. You should have all that money is committed before you've actually launched the campaign. Does that make sense? Okay, no one nodded, but I'm assuming it made sense. Oh, good, thank you. Now, the second group, remember I told you to make a list of 30 or so friends that are just the kindest people you know, not without regard to how much money they have or ability to write a check. These are the people you're going to call. Now, some of you have made money by doing sales, and you may say this is silly. But for those of you who have not made your money in sales, you probably appreciate that every time you hear no, it will be a difficult experience. So how many times do you want to hear no? How many times would you like to hear no? 7? Oh, 0. Yeah, 0. I vote for 0.
A lot, because that might mean you're getting closer to a yes.
Yeah, there is that. There is that. See, you've got that great sales mentality, and kudos to you. For the rest of us human beings, I would focus on taking this list of your close friends, the people who love you the most, that will do anything for you, and ask them to make donations. So that the conversation ends with how much can you give, and having them say, well, I can give you $12 or $13. I'll take the $20 I was going to use to take the kids for pizza next week, and we'll have spaghetti at home instead. Whatever, you want to reach out to those kind of people, the people that will say yes because they love you and they love what you're doing and they're just generous people, so that you don't have to hear no a lot when you're making those calls. Because my fear is when you hear no, you'll stop making calls. As long as people are saying yes, you'll keep making those calls. So that's why I focus not so much on the big dollars there, but on the process and having people say yes over and over. Now, if you have the gumption and the courage and the moral fiber to call 100 people and hear some of them say no, go for it. You're a better human than I am. I hate hearing no. So my strategy is to just call your friendliest friends. Now, if you got an average of $50 from all of your 30 friends, how much is that? That's another $1,500. And we're really talking about one person so far has now raised $3,000. Right? In our original math, we were saying one person probably could raise $2,000, right? So we're already way past that with this strategy. And this is a realistic strategy. My experience is people want to help. And if you'll go to the trouble of asking the people you really believe are your closest friends and family members, they're gonna give you something. Now, let's talk about email. When I say email, you can also think about Facebook Messenger. But again, I don't want you to think about this as a mass email that's going to 5,000 people. I know many of you in this room could come up with a list of 5,000 people. That's not what I'm talking about. And the goal shouldn't be to come up with a list of 5,000 people. It should be to come up with a list of your friends who are likely to donate, right? And you work that list. To make this work, there are a couple of things. The very first, do not, you must remember, is do not send an email to everyone in your Rolodex using BCC, right? In email, right? Have you ever received a BCC email like that? Okay. What does it tell you when you receive a BCC email like that? You're not very important, right? It's a big group email. What else does it tell you?
It's not personalized.
It's not personalized, right? They didn't care enough to write you a personal email.
Right.
What else does it tell you?
Usually copied.
It's usually copied, absolutely, right? They're copying a whole bunch of people. What were you going to say?
Well, it could also encourage them not to give because they see that there's a whole other group of people. Oh, well, what's my $50?
Exactly. That's the key thing that it says. All the things. But what she said is it tells you that you're not expected to give because there are so many other people who've been asked. You're not accountable. You're not even expected. You're really barely even invited. It's just like you saw it in the newspaper. It's just like you saw it on Facebook. You can just cruise on by. You have express permission to ignore this email because it was just BCC. You were an afterthought, right? Okay, I've made the point. Don't ever use BCC as a fundraising tool, okay? Now, what you do need to do is to customize it. Now, in the workbook, I have provided detailed step-by-step instructions for doing a mail merge. Now, for some of you, a mail merge is part of your everyday life. I honestly use mail merge more than once a day for something. I use it all the time. I live and die by mail merges. How many of you don't know what a mail merge is? Okay, so there are a few of you. Let me tell you what you're missing out on. I know you're going to be so disappointed to learn that there's this tool. But you can take a spreadsheet and put data in it and merge it with a template email and have all of the emails send. And there's a way to do this with Microsoft Office. There's a way to do it with Google, and I'm sure there's other tools as well. But it allows you to customize an email to lots of different people. But the key is to really customize it, right? To just say, "Dear Bob," instead of "Dear friend," is not going to cut it, right? Because Bob is smart. And Bob is going to look for cues and clues and signs and signals that this is just a fancy BCC, right? Because if you're asking for money, he really wants permission to not give you any money. So he's going to look for evidence that you sat down and wrote an email to him personally. So you've got to include a personal paragraph. It can be short, but there's got to be a personal paragraph in every single email. So in your spreadsheet, you go through and you just, if you're going to use a mail merge, you go through and you enter in that personal paragraph. Now, if that sounds confusing, daunting, don't spend 16 hours trying to figure out how to do a mail merge to save you 15 minutes. Just take a minute and copy and paste the template part of an email with a customized personal part of an email, right? So you just type in, "Bob, it was great golfing with you last weekend, and I should have mentioned, and I forgot to mention this thing that I'm doing with my nonprofit, and we're raising money, and I really need your support. I know you gave us $300 last year, or last week." Anyway, personalize the heck out of it, and then give them the copy and paste. Yeah.
Okay, so you brought up a half point that's a little off topic in the middle of that.
That's all right.
How often do you crowdfunding campaigns?
That is a great question, and I'm happy to address that here. As I mentioned, there are lots of different aspects to crowdfunding. And so you may use elements of crowdfunding on an ongoing basis. You may use elements of crowdfunding for multiple events during the year. You may do a 10K in the spring, and you may do a gala in the fall, and there may be some aspects of crowdfunding skills that you'll take from this discussion today. But, like a full-on dedicated crowdfunding campaign of the sort we're talking about, I would probably just do one a year.
So more than one, it turns into spam.
Well, yeah, you wear people out, right? And everything that we're talking about doing becomes less special and less effective the more often you do it. Although some people get used to that idea, right? Oh, okay, I'm going to now allocate this $100 a year for my new nonprofit. And they'll kind of adopt it and work it into their annual budget. Now, if you have a newsletter list, be sure to include crowdfunding asks as part of that. I'm not saying don't use that, but I'll show you some math in a minute that will surprise you. Now, here's the trick, and we're going to do this again. We're going to take a few minutes, and I want everyone in the room to write an email to your mother. Now, if your mother has passed away, you can still write it to her if you want. If that makes you uncomfortable, write it to a close living friend. Or a close passed away friend, if you'd prefer, just not to write to your mother. But what I want you to do is think about if you were writing a note to your mother to ask her to give $20 or $100 to your nonprofit, would it be really long? No. Would it be full of marketing language? Would you format it using a professional graphic designer to make it look like a fancy email from the New York Times or from Amazon or something? No. You would just write down the words, right? It would be a simple note, and maybe you'd include the link to make the donation, right? Okay. So I literally want each of you to take 5 minutes. Let's see, what's the time here? It's the perfect time. So we're going to take a 15-minute break, okay? And use 5 minutes of the 15 minutes to write an email to your mother, and we'll come back at the beginning and we'll read a couple of those emails, okay? But we're going to talk about why this is an important exercise when we finish reading the emails to our mothers, okay? So come back in 15 minutes with your email done.